You're listening to The Endless Party with your hosts,
Megan Elijah Armstrong. Hi everybody and welcome back to The Endless Party. Today we are joined by a special guest.
Yeah, so if you hear any heavy breathing on this episode, it's from our special guest.
One of our special friends decided that she was going to take a nap and the other one didn't. So she decided she wanted to be a part of this podcast
I'm just gonna be
today.
rocking this baby this whole time.
But that's okay. We're glad she's here.
Yeah, absolutely.
She might have some things to
What's
add.
not included was what she added earlier, because we wanted to spare all of your hearing. She was very vocal.
We just thought
She just needed some TLC.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. Okay, so before we jump into this episode, we wanted to share a comment that was made from one of our followers or viewers of this channel. And I think something that Elijah and I decided we wanted to do is we go through and we read your guys' comments, and if there's one that really stands out to us, then we're going to include it
in the podcast.
Just because we feel like everyone should.
Yeah, this is from
UNS33N, and we're thinking it means unseen.
Yes.
With two.
I would assume.
With the E's as threes.
Yeah.
So anyways, unseen with
Well,
threes.
I will say this too. He commented on the something big is
Oh, yes.
something big is going to happen party.
Yeah, that's a good addition.
Episode 55.
Yes.
And so
This
is
goes
the
along
context of what we talked about a little bit.
So anyways, Unseen said, the things people see as mediocre are where real value lies. He says, it's in your relationships, your family, and your values that really matter in life, not fame, wealth, or career. When you realize that and focus on living the life you have to the fullest, you win, instead of eternally sacrificing the now for an ideal that probably won't satisfy you. So basically what he's saying is we kind of have everything twisted in society, whereas we're seeing family and relationships as mediocre instead of careers and money, which is, and so thank you, Unseen, for that comment. We really liked it.
It was a really good comment, and it was pretty cool because we talked about how we gave up a job opportunity that paid really well but just took us away from our family, and how at the end of the day the money wasn't worth it to us. So thank you so much for your comment. Beautifully written.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to turn the stage over to Elijah to introduce. This was his idea.
This is my idea.
For this podcast. I think it's really good.
So I read this quote by William Shakespeare. Some of you have probably heard of it. And it's men's vices we paint in brass, their virtues we paint in water. And I just felt like we needed to speak on this because I think all of us have fallen victim of this, that we find fault in others, myself included, Meg included. Like we look, all of a sudden we try to find the chinks in people's armor.
Sometimes we're fault finders.
Yeah. And so we have tried, and this is a lifetime endeavor, to be good finders and to really try to paint men's virtues in brass instead of their vices. So what we kind of wanted to talk about is a few different things. We have a couple stories that we want to share. But one thing I want to question is, why do we always bring up past mistakes, arguments, and issues?
Yeah. So in both of mine and Elijah's life, and I think everyone can relate to this, people always want to bring up the things that you did wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what they choose to remember.
Well, and not only that, they bring up like past relationships that were a big mistake.
Yes, that's happened to both of us for sure.
And it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I mean, it happened to me like this last week.
Yeah, like
I'm like, why are people? I'm married with 2 kids. I'm happy. Like that's in the past.
Why do people continually bring up things that are in the past that have no business being in the present?
Oh, that was really not. I really liked that.
Well, well, thank you. But it's interesting because I just feel like this is something that we wanted to talk about later on in the podcast too. It's like, why would any of us ever would any of us ever want to be basically condemned for all of our faults? not condemned. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like known?
Yes, known. That's the word.
Like, do we want to be known for the worst thing we've ever done? Like, is that right? Because we've all made mistakes. We're all human. And do you want to be known for the worst thing that you've ever done? Because
the answer is no.
The answer is no.
Of course not. Then why do we make everybody else we know known for the worst thing they've ever done?
I don't know. I'm not sure why we do that.
It's insane.
You know, it's always like, hey, did you hear like so-and-so did this? Or that, you know, it's like, yeah, this woman, she's been married for 35 years, but 30 years ago she had an affair.
Right.
Or, you know.
Right.
But it's like, but for 30 years, she actually has been faithful.
Right.
You know, and she changed and she like, overcame everything.
And this is actually a topic that's going on in really our nation right now, that our forefathers are just being painted in a horrible light.
Are they really?
Yeah. For, you know, and don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, they do have like dark
they all have dark spots, right? Because they're human beings.
Of course.
Like, in no way, shape, or form is slavery ever okay, nor was it ever okay.
We're not
it's
condoning
wrong.
it
It's horrible. And, you know, the forefathers, they owned slaves at one point. And that's horrible. But why do we all of a sudden just disregard everything good that they did?
When they created a country that
actually was the first country to abolish slavery.
And like foster freedom.
Yes. That's my question, right? Why are we painting them in this horrible light? And it's not just them. We do it to everybody.
Right.
And it's crazy because, I mean, for example, like Martin Luther King, incredible person, went on to do incredible things. He also has black spots in his life, but we don't remember that.
We choose to remember the good.
We choose to remember the good. And so this is something I just want to do. And I'm not even just saying this for, you know, I'm saying this for my sake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need to correct it and not be a fault finder, because there are so many times when I'll have a conversation with Meg, or I'll bring something up, be like, yeah, you know what? So-and-so did this. It's like, who cares? Like, it's not even a big deal. They're actually probably a good person at the end of the day and just made a mistake.
I think, really quick, I want to jump in on one of the lines that's on our wall, and I think it's really good. And it's like, all of us want to be able to forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future.
Right.
And if that's what you want to do yourself, then you should give others the grace to do that as well. And stop seeing other people for the thing, you know, for the worst thing they've done. Instead, why don't we look at them for the best thing that they've ever done?
Right.
And paint them in that light.
I think that's the beauty of this topic, right? There's a quote by Bob Richards. He was a famous pole vaulter. I think he was a 2-time Olympic champion, if I remember right. But he says, one reason why I think a great deal of Jesus is because he never pointed out the weaknesses of people, never dwelt on their failures and their shortcomings. He always thought of the dream that God had for their lives, never emphasizing their failures. He simply said, go and sin no more. Be what God intends you to be. And isn't that what we all hope
Yes.
that we can do for each other? I mean, Jesus does it for each of us, so why can't we do it too?
I don't know why it's so instilled in our culture. Honestly, I think it's a habit.
I think it is a habit.
And I think we learn it. I think it's just a habit. I think it's been passed down.
Well, it's actually, yeah, it has been passed down. I mean, even if you think of like our media, like
we talk more about
negative news. That's
yes.
all it is. It's negativity.
Okay, so this is actually a good example. My dad is on school board
Yeah.
in a small community in Arizona. Anyways, he's on the school board. And what's interesting is most of the public actually agrees with the practices that he's trying to implement into the school district, and just trying to create a better just sense of community and like education for students in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's interesting is he'll have a fantastic meeting at school board, and what happens is the newspaper will take out some little comment or something that someone said, or we'll find the one person that kind of disagrees with what he's trying to do, and that's what they focus on, and that's what they post in the media.
Right.
That's what they choose to like highlight. It's not the beautiful meeting that he just had and the policies that he's trying to implement that so many people agree with.
30-second comment that somebody made.
Yes, and then that's
Instead
what they
of the
choose.
30-minute meeting that was just great.
Right, and so him and I were talking the other day, and it's pretty frustrating for him because he's like, that isn't even actually what went down in
completely
this
blown out of
meeting, right?
context. Yeah.
Completely blown out of context, but what they do is they fault find. And usually they put his face
As the fault.
As the
Poor
fault.
guy.
He has strong
At
shoulders.
least he has a nice face.
He does.
He's just painted in a poor light.
Anyways,
Poor guy.
but the thing is like that's kind of like the trend of our, society. Like think about the things that are talked about on the news, whether, local or nationwide. It's always
usually just
usually
doom
negative
and gloom
stuff,
all the time.
And I don't
And
know
it's
why
pretty
we
sad.
foster that. And then, that's what's portrayed in the media, so that's what we talk about in our homes. And then we start to take that and just start to talk about other people in our communities, and it's just this whole chain of events.
Right. I think that's a good leeway into this story. It's actually from an old Scotland story, or old Scottish story, and it's the sheep thief and the saint. And so these two young men, they were actually brothers. They lived in poverty, and one day they got caught stealing 2 sheep from like the most wealthy lord of the land.
Okay.
And so he catches them and immediately takes them to the blacksmith and brands them ST on their head for sheep thief. And then they throw them out in the gutter, and then now everybody can know that they are branded as thieves.
The sheep thieves.
Yeah, the sheep thieves, right?
It's on their face?
It's on their forehead.
Oh, their
ST.
forehead. So it's just like, that's what you
It's
see when you...
prominent. That's
That's
what
what
you
you see. Okay.
So one of the brothers, we'll call him Dan.
Dan.
So Dan just decided that that was his lot in life, that he was condemned to be a sheep thief. And so that is exactly what he decided to be, was just awful. He was a know-nothing, just really a loser.
He lived up to the brand.
He
on
lived
his
up to the
forehead.
brand.
Yeah.
The other brother, William, we'll call him, William decided to turn his whole life around. And so he began to help in the community wherever possible. Now, at first, everybody kind of, gave him a horrible look, like, why are you doing this? Like, what's in it for you?
They're
Are you just going to,
suspicious, yeah.
take something of mine? The years and years go by, and all of a sudden, everybody just loves William. Dan eventually is just nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be heard. He's gone. But William becomes more and more ingrained in this community that people start to rely on him all the time. And eventually it gets to the point where a traveler comes in and he sees William with a very faint ST on his head, and he's helping one of the locals. And the traveler asks one of the locals, hey, why does that man have ST on his head? He goes, oh, that's St. William.
Oh, cool.
And then he says, what do you mean St. William? They're like, well, we don't know exactly what the ST means, but we all assume it just means saint.
That's so cool.
And so it's pretty interesting because I think also when it comes to like faults, we can paint people in such a poor light to the point where it gets that they start to believe it, right? Like if we continually find the faults within others, they will start to believe it, just like Dan. Thankfully, there's people out there like William that when people see the fault in them and the mistakes that they've made, he just brushes it off, and eventually those mistakes become part of him and they actually become strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we continue to do that, sometimes, people are going to be in a rough spot, and we really could have prevented it just because we could have found the good.
And I think this principle is especially important within your closest, it's important with everybody, but I think it's especially important in your closest relationships.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the way that you talk to your kids and what you decide to script them as. And it's pretty interesting. So with the experience of having identical twins, it's really interesting because everybody, they don't want to necessarily fault find, but they want to differentiate one baby from the other.
Yeah.
So people will always be like, well, who cries more? Well, who's
More
angrier?
fussy?
Who's sassier? Who does
Who's
this?
fatter?
Who does
got a skinnier face?
Who's chubbier? Who's
yeah.
rounder? Who's this? And Elijah and I, before these babies were even born, we were like, that's not how this is going to go.
No.
Our twins are not going to be known for their differences. They're just going to be known for who they are.
Right.
And I think that's what we want. I think that's like a really good thing to apply to everybody you meet. Don't try to look at them for, their differences or ways that they struggle or their weaknesses, right? And that's kind of what people try to like ask us.
Yeah.
What are the weaknesses of your babies, not the
Yes,
strengths?
exactly.
They're never like,
what are the faults?
Yeah, they always want to know their faults.
Yeah, they're never like, who's just the happiest little baby?
No,
it's always like, who's the angry baby? Who's the mean baby?
And Elijah and I are like,
they're both great babies.
They're both great babies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't really understand why people do that. And there's actually I don't even know how to phrase this exactly, but when we begin to find faults in others, usually it's the faults within ourselves that we can spot out.
Yeah.
Right? So if all of a sudden I say somebody is extremely prideful,
you should probably
look within yourself to decide, well, you might be a little prideful.
I actually have been really trying to implement this principle, and as soon as I'm starting to cast blame on other people for characteristics, I've tried to like create the habit of always saying like, oh my goodness, is that something I see within myself?
Right. Am I doing this?
Right. If that makes me so mad that person, like, let's say this person like gossips so much and talks about other people, and if that makes me so mad, then I try to like look within myself and I'm like, is that what I'm doing? Am I talking about other people? That's just an example, but
right. No, absolutely. And so this is something me and Meg actually really, really have tried to implement, as she was just mentioning, is because let me back up a little bit. Me and Meg believe that you should have one person, and that person should be your spouse, that you can just openly discuss whatever topic that you think necessary, good or bad, right? If it's about somebody,
there's sometimes you have to
there's some time that you have to work through things, and so we'll come to each other and we'll have this discussion on certain people or about certain topics, and I'm just like, we both have been like, maybe actually they're not the problem. Maybe it's me.
It's normally how the conversation
Usually
goes.
That's how it goes.
And I will say these conversations stay within the walls of like our bedroom. They don't
go anywhere. But yeah, it's right between us.
But sometimes like, well, what am I doing?
Right. Well, it's been interesting because we've even had this like discussion where one of us will be so heated about something, and then all of a sudden like our spouse won't even say anything.
And then
they'll just kind of sit there, and then all of a sudden,
oh man,
it's like, oh, it's probably me. Like I'm probably the one that needs to change. Like I need to make a difference because
it's like the worst.
Why am I getting why am I letting this person upset me so? Or like, and so we would just highly recommend that each of us strive to just start to find the good in people rather than the bad.
Yeah.
Find the good instead of the faults.
So I was just, we were like collecting little things we wanted for this podcast, and I was just like looking stuff online, and I found this really great article by a psychologist. I don't know his last name, but his first name is Greg.
Nice.
Anyways.
Greg the psychologist.
It's Greg the psychologist, so there's credit where credit's due. Anyways, so one of the things he says that's just, I don't know, it's just kind of like uncomfortable, that's kind of true, is oftentimes we're trying to point out others' flaws to boost our own self-esteem and find happiness. And it's like, that is not where happiness is found. But it's really interesting. I've watched a lot of times socially where you'll be in a group of people and an individual will want to feel like confident and really good about themselves within that circle. And so what they start to do is they start to fault find, because mentally in their brains they've created that habit. It's like, oh, well, if I'm putting this person down, then others will see me as more built up more than
I'm bigger than them.
I'm bigger than that person, and that's going to make them appreciate me, and also I'm going to feel happier. But actually, if what's interesting psychologically, if you start to put people down, you might get a little boost for momentary.
Ego might get a little
Your
boost.
ego gets a little
you're
momentary.
in the moment, but then afterwards.
And then afterwards, you actually feel worse about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like what you're realizing is that your insecurities even become more prominent.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't even, you're just not confident, and you're not confident enough in yourself
to be able to stand other people's successes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you just try to put them down. And I don't know. And it's interesting too, like when I'm in a situation with someone who is putting people down, putting other people down. It's interesting is because I'm always like, oh my gosh, like when I'm not here, they're probably doing the same thing to me.
Right.
And then it's also a disservice to that individual because people don't want to be close to them because all they do is find the fault in other people. You don't want to hang out with someone who's always just bagging on you and bagging on others because there's no like security in that.
Well, it actually brings up a topic that I didn't even include in the notes, but if you hear a negative comment about you, you have to hear the opposite of that comment 16 times minimum to counteract that one negative remark, right? And so for example, if somebody says, I think I've talked about this in the podcast before, but if somebody says, wow, like so-and-so so stuck up, or if you hear that, and then all of a sudden you have to hear the opposite of that in order for you to like just counteract that one negative fault-finding comment. And so you can really, really hurt people just by one off-the-cuff negative remark. I mean, it's pretty interesting because I even look at, like, my childhood, for example. I was, like, the dumb kid. I was the fast kid, and I was the super athletic kid, but I was also the dumb kid.
That's so sad.
For years and years and years. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I was, like, pretty bad at English. I was okay at math. A couple other subjects, but like English was just garbage. It was horrible. And every year my teachers would just kind of mark on my report card like needs help, struggling, just like small little things. And that's what you saw every day. And then it wasn't until my third grade year that my third grade teacher came up to me and she said, you need to enter this poetry contest.
Your poem's really good.
She's like, this poem's great.
Do you have that poem?
Probably somewhere.
What was it about?
It was about winter.
Okay, cool.
That's all I remember.
Okay, I'm just
She's like,
curious.
you need to enter this. And it was school-wide. So it was K through 6th grade. And I was like, I don't think I'll do very well. And she's like, you need to enter it. Like, this poem's great. Like, enter it. So I enter this contest, and I end up winning the contest. And from then on, like, I believed I was a good writer just because of this one kind act of a third grade teacher saying, you know what, like, forget everybody else. This is a beautiful poem. You're a great writer. Just enter the contest. And that's what impact that people can have, just finding the good in other people. Like, there's a story of Stevie Wonder. Mm-hmm. So Stevie Wonder, when he was little, he was born blind. And he was in this class, and the class pet got loose, and it was a mouse. And
it was a mouse?
It was a mouse. And the teacher said, Steven, I need you to stay behind during recess because you're the only one that can hear the tiny little squeaks of the mouse. So could you stay behind and help me find this mouse? He can't see.
He couldn't see the mouse.
He
could hear.
And he ended up finding it. And from then on, he's like, that's when I knew I had a special...
That's his gift.
That's when I knew I had a special gift. And then, obviously, it was Stevie Wonder. He went on to be a world-famous musician. And it was just that small act that somebody believed in him.
Wow.
And somebody saw the good amongst all the mistakes that everybody else saw.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a cool story. He's a dope dude.
That is super cool. So I think the next thing we wanted to just talk a little bit about is actually another quote from this poem. And I think it's this line that we're also trying to live by, and it's give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. And that's just something I'm really trying to apply into my life. I'm trying to work so hard on myself that I don't even have the time to find fault in others because I'm just working so hard on trying to, become the person I want to be.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I hope anybody who's watching or listening to this, that's why we're doing this podcast. For really everybody out there that's willing to listen, but also it's for us. It's for us to raise our bar of excellence and our standards to really strive to live up to these ideals that we talk about.
Because what's interesting is, like, as soon as we do a podcast about a certain principle, I'm like, I have just put this out into the universe and I have to live by this.
Yeah.
And I want to live by it anyways. And of course, I'm a human. We both fall.
We
fall short.
obviously aren't
And
going
the people
to measure up
closest
every
to us
time.
are going to know, know this more than others, you know?
Of course.
But the thing is we're really trying to put these ideas and these principles out into the universe in hopes that we can implement them into our lives.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the end goal of really this entire podcast, is to bless and benefit the lives of each and everybody that listens and watches and tunes in, because you're in this process with us. You know, we're striving to be good finders, and if you start doing it, like, you're right there with us.
Right.
It's just a journey together.
And it's just, like, interesting too, because think about the impact we all could make.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just one other person listening to this starts to be a good finder, well, that person's going to have an influence on so many other people to start doing the same.
Yeah.
You know, and think about the change that could happen within your families, and then that can impact your community, which can impact your city. You know,
Right.
It just has this really positive.
Like, one kind act can change the entire world, because eventually it's going to just blossom from there. I mean, like I said, my third grade teacher, I still
Right.
remember it to this day, and now I want to be an author because of it.
Right. So if you're someone who's looking for the good in others and letting them know the good you see, think about how that person is going to blossom, and think about what they're then going to do to help inspire other people.
Absolutely.
It's just really cool to think about what could happen.
It's incredible how, like, what could happen.
Oh, hello.
My baby knows it.
She knows it too.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think I just want to say this one last time just to bring it all home. But the whole point of this podcast was, the whole inspiration was, men's vices we paint in brass, their virtues we paint in water. But our hope is that each of you will decide to paint men's virtues in brass and their vices in water.
Absolutely. And our little miss is going to send us off here. So
anyways, thank
you for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Yes, and please comment, and
it could be featured.
It could be featured. So please let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear. So until next time, bye everybody.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Endless Party. Please feel free to join us over at our website, theendlessparty.com, for more of our content. Also, we would love to hear from you. Leave some comments and let us know what you're interested in us talking about.
Seriously, like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, whatever it is the platform says to do, so that we can keep partying together.